Welcome to Sync Up, a show about OneDrive, the intelligent files app for Microsoft 365. We are your hosts, Ankita and Jason Moore. I'm Ankita Kirti, Product Manager on the OneDrive team.
And I'm Jason Moore, Director of Program Management for OneDrive. This show will take you behind the scenes of OneDrive, shedding light on how OneDrive connects you to all of your files in Microsoft 365 so you can share and work together from anywhere while protecting your work from accidental loss and malicious attacks.
Today, we are so excited to have on the show Stephen Rice and Noorez Khamis.
So don't go away. We've got another great show today.
With today's reality of remote work and online learning, the ability to share content to get work done has become even more critical. And because of this, security around external sharing is more important than even before. While external sharing helps people stay productive and connected, we do understand that it makes you admins nervous against the risks it poses. Risks of accidental sharing of sensitive content or risk of sharing with unintended recipients. All these can pose a threat to the integrity and privacy of your data, people, and devices. And we completely understand that, which is why with OneDrive and Microsoft 365, we intend to help you to define a secure virtual perimeters for sharing content, educate people about your policies for secure collaboration, and monitor how people share and discover and address gaps. We've published a practical guide that defines these parameters and strategies and can help you learn more about how you can easily manage secure external sharing. And today we have experts with us to discuss the same along with some real-life scenarios and examples. Jason, would you introduce the guests now?
Absolutely. Our guests today are Stephen Rice and Noorez Khamis. Stephen is a senior PM on the OneDrive team, working on sharing and collaboration for end users and for admins. And he'd like everyone to know that he's better known for knowing more about Star Wars than me. We'll see about that later, Stephen. Rez has been co-founder at two companies. First, VP of Technology at a Microsoft 365 consulting services organization called Creospark out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, that specializes in OneDrive, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, integration, knowledge and document management, and much more. Also, Rez is VP of Technology at an M365 product-based company called CloudSpark Labs that specializes in custom Microsoft 365 SaaS-based team apps.
The first thing to consider about external sharing is for an admin is establishing boundaries to help prevent critical mistakes and setting those hard outer and sometimes internal limits for your business organization and for your users. So Stephen and Rez, what are your thoughts and some real life examples around establishing these boundaries?
Yeah, so Ankita, for me, the real starting point here is this is complicated. Managing collaboration for an organization, whether you're a company of 5 or a company of 10,000, can be complicated. And in OneDrive, we support a ton of different policies and knobs and configurations to kind of help you find that right balance. And I think what's really helpful is when you start thinking about what are the actual use cases and scenarios that I care about. And that's really where these boundaries come into play. Boundaries these are the things that you don't want your users to be able to do. And these are going to come out of discussions from your security team, something that Jason and I have a lot of experience with, even inside of Microsoft. What are the things that your security team thinks are okay versus not okay? What does that dialogue look like? And then a lot of it might come out of your industry as well. If you're in healthcare or financial industry, you're going to have very specific requirements and laws that you need to comply with. And that's really where boundaries come into play. It's about helping you kind of start to understand what your sharing situation is going to look like. I don't know, Rez, how does it end up working in the real world, though? What do these conversations end up looking like for you?
It's critical. To start out, it's fundamental in our organization, Creospark, for our project methodology in our envisioning and discovery phase. And we go through that with all of our customers. So in this phase, we go through the various technical governance options, such as those boundary options. The options the customer needs to be aware of when planning their information architecture for the various Microsoft 365 services that we're helping them deploy. And those boundaries are going to form the key fundamental governance decisions they need to make. And we help them take them through some of the best practices because sometimes they just don't know where to start. And this leads to external sharing, which we're going to talk to you about soon.
I have to ask, Rez, what is your best practice when it comes to kind of setting up these boundaries?
The best practice could be anything from deploying information protection policies. Could be anything from securing individual libraries. It could be setting the security architecture for your channels versus teams versus, how that maps all together with the sharing and the boundaries they're going to have for all of the people involved in that particular project. Like you said, it's complicated.
What I hear you saying in that, Rez, is kind of it really matters about what's important to your business, right? And which things you're trying to optimize and prioritize for. And so having clarity about the business outcomes and goals you want will really inform what you're going to anchor on for that conversation.
Exactly.
So, Stephen, on this, I'd love to get some examples in terms of policy and kind of how and why they're used. What would be the triggers that make me think this policy is appropriate or not?
Yeah, so a great example of a policy here is the ability to restrict external sharing to only specific users. And where we really see this used is in cases where you want to make sure that your users maybe go through some kind of training or, proven that they've been capable of being a responsible adult. Once you know that they understand the risks of external sharing, you feel confident they're going to make smart decisions, you can say, yep, you are now blessed and able to go share externally. And it's a great way to just add a little bit of extra security on top of your sharing policies.
Yeah, so I can give an example of that. So I've got a client, a big, large manufacturing client out of the northeastern US that has extremely confidential AutoCAD documents that can't be shared with anybody outside of the organization other than with their own customers. So what we're doing there from a technical perspective, we're dynamically creating these account team sites by integrating into their Salesforce solution. And we're using Azure Automation and Logic Apps to create these account team sites within SharePoint. So the solution we chose to be able to restrict, and in terms of a policy perspective, to only be able to share customers and their accounts, was to take advantage of the site collection settings, which restrict sharing by domain. And we're doing this via the API. So that's an example of a policy that we've implemented for our customer that can restrict the domains that anything within that site is shared to.
That's a great example. I love the specificity of the need there on protecting that content and having a way to manage and control that. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing, Rez. It seems that, really setting people up for successful collaboration is critical to any organization, to any business. And of course, making sure that even if security isn't the first and foremost critical thing at all moments, maybe not every document is as critical as those AutoCAD files you were mentioning, you still want to make sure it's taken care of. So what are some of the kind of significant measures that you'd recommend an administrator should take? Stephen, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, this is a really critical part, I think, of administrating sharing. You want to make sure that your users who don't always put security first, but you can make sure that they're guided down the right path. And a great example of that in my mind are the default link policies that we have in the product, where you can say, hey, I want to make sure that if users clicking share, not thinking about what they're doing, that the link they get is only good for people inside of the organization. And the real power there is a user who is thinking, who is ready to put security first, can make a deliberate choice to pick a different link type. They can get a link that's more permissive. From an IT perspective, you can feel confident that they're not doing something on accident. They're making a deliberate choice. They're thinking about how to collaborate effectively and securely and be successful. Rez, do you have any examples or things that are kind of top of mind for you here?
Well, from a consulting perspective, we kind of take it a different way. We don't kind of look at the technology and what capabilities are there, and which are a lot. We kind of look at it from a question standpoint to our admins and to whoever our customer is. So for example, what applications will you allow external sharing for? What are the default sharing settings you want to configure for SharePoint Online and OneDrive? How about Azure AD? What domains are we going to allow, if we're going to allow all the domains or not? How will we handle guest access in Azure AD? What events do we need to audit or report on beyond 90 days? These are the types of questions we kind of look at and then kind of marry them to the options and the plethora of options you guys have in the Microsoft 365 administration and configuration.
I love both the recommendations there. And it makes me curious. Do you have examples where people get it wrong, where they're using something kind of in a way that's not really going to achieve what they intend as a result? That maybe a common one people could look out for as a pitfall?
I can give you an example. So let's go back to that AutoCAD customer. So we were going down the path of possibly kind of securing the AutoCAD document from an information protection perspective. However, from an information protection perspective, AutoCAD is not a supported out-of-the-box file type. So we were going down the direction of these guys are going to these SharePoint document libraries where they're updating all these AutoCAD files. But do we really think that they're going to go to the client and the kind of labeling client and tag everyone, which turns it into a .p file? And it was hard for them to actually go down that route and to be able to tag their documents that way. So what we did was we looked at other sharing settings available, such as the blocking by domain, and that was able to achieve what we're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great example. And I love the kind of notion of finding the right tool for the job. And there's in your kind of storyline, there's this notion that I think is really powerful, which is really thinking through what are users going to do? How are you making it easy for them to do the right thing by default and make that so, they'll fall into the right path as opposed to something they're going to curmudge over or maybe even find ways around if it's not exactly the right thing for them. Ankita, I think you had a question as well about secure collaboration.
Thank you, Stephen, about talking about the default link policies and Rez. Those were great examples. Another thing that has stood out and I've seen customers really appreciate is the expiration policies that we have. Stephen, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, expiration is a great example, both in OneDrive and in Azure with the Access Reviews feature. It's a great way to make sure that users, they'll start collaborating. They're working with Jason. They're working with Rez. They're trying to get stuff done. And they don't always think about the life cycle of that collaboration. Maybe they're done collaborating and they don't clean up the access after them. Expiration is really about making sure to do that for the user. User gets to collaborate and you get to feel confident that that data is not going to be left externally accessible for long periods of time.
Yeah, and if I can go back to the previous question you asked, what's my favorite best practice? I would say expiration policies are probably the most important one because of just that situation. People are going to share documents and forget that they shared them and they might not want to share them anymore. And put it in terms of the end user, make it really easy for them to be able to know that in 30, 60, 90 days, whenever they set that expiration policy, that document is no longer going to be shared and they can be comforted in knowing that that could be set at a policy level rather than an individual level as well.
We have these amazing features that we have discussed, and not only in this episode, but even in the previous episodes. But I think a critical aspect of making sure all these features are successful is if we are able to educate the users about these features and about secure collaboration so that we can assure that the employees are successful in their day-to-day work. And we have done a lot of innovations in product and otherwise. Stephen and Rez, how would you advise an IT admin of a school or a business to address educating their users around secure collaboration?
I'd have to start by saying that education is so key. You're going to spend, as an admin, so much time setting up your policies, configuring things so that everything goes just right. But if your users don't understand why that's happening, they're going to find ways around it. They're going to go create or buy other products that you don't have an insight to. And that can be really dangerous. And a great example, I think, of a policy and a way to kind of help guide that along is we have a custom help link policy so that when users get errors like, hey, you're not allowed to share externally, you can tell them, hey, and this is why. We have a company policy that says you should do it this way instead. And it's really just a great way to help nudge them down the right way and help teach them how your organization collaborates effectively and securely. And the challenge, of course, here is when your users don't understand policies, they're going to go and find their own products to use. And that results in what we would call shadow IT. Rez, have you ever worked with any customers that have had a really bad shadow IT problem?
Most definitely. And how we try to get around that is that whole education aspect that you're talking about. At our company, Creospark, we have, as part of all of our engagements, the underlying adoption, change management, communication, and training aspect to it. And as part of that, we actually go through all of these types of policies that have been set and mandated from the top level of the organization down. And we tell people that to be sure to not share something outside of the organization in a certain area based on where it is. We try to restrict it as much as we can with the policies we have available, but it really comes down to training. So if there's a restricted document that should not be shared externally, ideally, we'll have some sort of protection behind the scenes, like on the information protection side. But if anybody wants, whether it's taking a screenshot or people can get around these policies, right? So it's a matter of education to them and taking them through those policies that you put in place. Now, a good mechanism that we've done for kind of disseminating that on a regular basis, because it's not a one-time thing, is listing those policies out in some sort of governance portal on their organizational corporate intranet, and having that ongoing updating and education and videos they can refer to that just talk about these policies that we put in place.
So with in-product message error help links and proactive change management and adoption done by IT team or consultants like you, I think education of end users can be a little easier than people imagine it to be, and that can lead to a successful change management. Do you have any experience or any example of a successful change management story that you can share, especially right now when everything is remote?
That's a great question, Ankita. We now really have to have a different mindset when it comes to adoption, change management, and training when we're working with our clients, especially during these times during the pandemic. Gone are the days where we can perform those physically on-site awareness campaigns via things like physical posters hanging around the office, little gifts like buttons at people's desks, cafeteria drop-ins, and type of trainings. On top of the regular physical, now virtual trainings for all the personas you need to train, now we have to look at other ways of delivering. Things like teaser news and announcements on your SharePoint-based intranets, your Teams channel, or Yammer. We should look at digital cheat sheets where you can post on those types of services. All the type of digital content for FAQs, tips and tricks. All of that we want to surface within the services. For one of our large automotive clients, we actually built a Microsoft Teams personal app, which displayed mini how-to videos, reference guides, FAQs, and it furthermore had this cool thing, which was a Q&A bot leveraging Azure Cognitive Services, like Q&A Maker and bot services. And anyone could just go to this personal app and ask the questions they had. And it was really easily maintainable by the people who were creating those questions and answers.
I love the physical example too of the the things that are hung up. It's so true, right? Like that, you just don't have those options.
I mean, speak for yourself, Jason. I still hang up, things in my house to remind me, don't share sensitive content externally.
I'll be mailing everyone on the team posters I've made to hang up in their homes. Don't worry.
Be careful of phishing attempts. Yeah,
you should see the one
when you're brushing your teeth.
Yeah, you should see the ones I made for hand washing. Stephen, thanks so much for kind of the exploration and discussion of these boundaries and how you think about, managing organizations, educating people, how to create policies that are going to help you spend the time on the right things and encourage the best behaviors. But I thought it'd be interesting to also talk a little bit about, how does it go for monitoring and really managing, understanding the rollout or the current state of your world? And I thought, Stephen, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the product has evolved with respect to reporting and auditing.
Yeah, reporting and auditing are really I almost want to call them the bread and butter of an IT admin's job nowadays. The more time you can spend watching for things going wrong instead of just flipping knobs and switches, I think the better off you're going to be. And so, of course, we continue to work on and kind of expand our auditing functionalities. Auditing is just knowing what's going on in your organization is so powerful. But we started really building on top of that. Things like the new productivity score in the Microsoft Admin Center, which is really about saying, hey, what are the insights in your organization? What percentage of your team is collaborating via sharing cloud documents versus collaborating versus email attachments? How many people are collaborating and co-authoring at the same time versus working asynchronously? These are the types of insights that really help you shape how you talk to your users and how you work with them better. And another great example, which is going all the way to kind of we're past bread and potatoes, and I think we're now at the 5-course, 5-star Michelin star meal, whatever you want to call it, which is the Microsoft Cloud App Security feature set, which is really about, again, going deeper into auditing, reporting, and pulling out those insights, pulling out anomaly reporting, things that really help you, be a super powered individual in your organization, because all this reach and oversight that is now just at your fingertips is really powerful.
Yeah, I would like to echo that on the cloud app security side, because we had one customer actually trying to figure out why they were getting alerts all the time from this one user. And then when we dug into the alert that was happening on the cloud app security side, it turned out that customer had a few people that were syncing their OneDrive, their mobile photos, and they would take like hundreds of photos a day, and then they would go and delete all those photos. And Cloud App Security would give an alert saying that there was like 100 deletes happening every day from this one user. And when we dug in, that alert was just like, maybe you shouldn't do that on your corporate device. So that's a pretty cool example there. Now, another way of doing some proactive auditing is, configuring things like data loss prevention and protection, information protection, to be notified of if a policy hits where somebody's putting some PII information or a social security number or banking information, right? So that's another way of proactively auditing that all the conventional mechanisms you have within the tooling.
I love those examples, Rez. I think they kind of help really ground the reality on what people see and do, and how often, it may be something as simple or as silly as someone taking all those photos, but it really is about putting you in control and making sure that you're able to not just know things happen, but understand why and then take action around them. Thank you both, Stephen, Rez, for being on the show today. It's been great to have you on, having experts talking about this. It really, I think our listeners will have enjoyed that quite a bit. Now, of course, while we're through with our regular kind of workplace related questions, we always like to ask a question that's a little bit kind of more fun, learn a bit more about you, get some sense what's going on. It's the time of year, certainly in the US, where we are working our way towards Halloween. It's going to be different this year. I think that goes without saying. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about kind of favorite candies. Whether Halloween is something you're into or not, I was curious to hear from each of you what your favorite candy might be. And I'll say it up front, the more controversial, the better. I'm excited to hear about some crazy candies that you like. Ankita, let's start with you.
So for me, it was growing up, it was anything Cadbury, be it dairy milk, eclairs, anything. Here, I've started liking Hershey's a lot, especially Hershey's Kisses, because it makes you feel that you're not eating a lot of chocolate, but you end up eating a lot. So yeah, between Cadbury and Hershey's.
There's a heavy milk chocolate influence I'm hearing in that. Okay, yeah. All right. Rez, how about you?
I'm probably going to tell you some chocolates you guys don't have down there in the States, because I'm out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I'm not sure. Have you guys heard of Coffee Crisp?
Yes.
That is not a candy chocolate that you would get historically out of the U.S., but when I lived there, I certainly missed it. Unfortunately, obviously, we're not going to be sending my kids to Halloween this year. So we had already ordered a box of it, and it's gone already.
Means you need another box. But yeah, no, that's I haven't heard of that in a long time, and actually haven't had any in quite a long time. I'll have to figure out how to acquire some. I always like when I travel to pick up as much as I can as I'm passing through in different places. There's so many good things all around the world. Stephen, how about you? What's your candy pleasure?
Yeah, so I have to go with the Milky Way, particularly the US version. I had to look it up to make sure, because I know it's different internationally versus in the US, but specifically chocolate bar, preferably milk chocolate, layer of caramel, layer of nougat underneath. But if you want my controversial take, if your candy bar has nuts in it, I do not need it. That is no, thank you.
Same.
Wow.
Yeah. It needs to be only chocolate. I don't like nuts in
chocolate.
Wow. Okay.
Reese's are different. That's not that's peanut butter. That's not a nut specifically, but
legume.
Exactly. Yes.
So I guess I'm going to disappoint you. I think, growing up, my favorite candy bar in particular was Bounty. I love the coconutty goodness of a good Bounty, and I love it coming in 2 pieces because I find it easier to manage, in that bar. So I'm a big fan. And then my controversial, Halloween specific take is I'm one of those people who really likes candy corn. I always seem to get weird looks when I shove fistfuls into my mouth, but maybe it's the fistful of candy corn or any candy really. But yeah, no, candy corn is something I enjoy quite a bit.
I always thought Bounty is just a brand of paper towel. This is the first time I got to know that there's a candy also by the name of it.
I did have to look it up, Jason, but it makes
even I had to look it up.
Looks like it was founded in 1960, something like that. So I understand why I've never heard of it, but you have.
+1.
Well, all right. That's fine. We'll see. When we get back to traveling, I'll treat you guys to some bounties. Well, thank you, Steven and Rez. It's been great to have you on the show. I think our audience is going to be really interested to find and learn more about you. Where should they go? Steven?
Yeah, so of course, you can always find me on the Microsoft Tech community. I tend to be on there answering questions occasionally about sharing or things like that. So you can always mention me there. If we ever get back to in-person conferences, you can usually find me at Microsoft Ignites. And if you're looking for non-Microsoft tech related things, you can always find my Star Wars podcast, the Ion Cannon podcast, for a very different topic, let's say, than this, but hopefully also a lot of fun.
And how about you, Rez?
Well, if you want to get a hold of me or my companies, the first one is creospark.com and the second one is cloudsparklabs.com. I speak at various Microsoft 365 events and SharePoint Saturdays and such. In fact, today I just did Microsoft Friday Cincinnati on a session on Cortex. So you can find me around there at the spsevents.org website. My Twitter handle is NKHAMIS, or you can get me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you again both for being on the show. It's been great to have you, and we'll be watching to see where you guys pop up next.
Thanks for participating again, Steven and Rez. It was an amazing conversation. And folks, if you want to learn more about this practical guide, we have published it in our tech community blog. Link to the blog is in the show notes. So do read up and let us know if you have more queries around it. It's time to share with the listeners the latest feature releases. We announced a bunch of features at Ignite, but I would like to do a quick recap of the ones that have started to roll out or are generally available. Considering we were discussing about sharing today, let me begin with some sharing features. Move and keep sharing, which will help you retain the sharing permissions when you move a document from OneDrive to SharePoint, is rolling out. Expiring access for external users, where external users will automatically lose access to content, and this access can be then extended or revoked, is also rolling out. Sharing integration in Microsoft Teams has also started to roll out that would enable you to set familiar sharing and access controls directly within Teams. We also released a couple of enhancements to known folder move to give you more control over your KFM deployment. Firstly, we've removed selective sync as a blocker for known folder move. So now with KFM, it is possible, even if the desktop documents or pictures folders were previously selected not to sync down to the device, instead of blocking KFM, we will support syncing those folders at time of KFM. Secondly, admins can now choose which known folders, be it desktop, documents, or pictures, that they would like to move to OneDrive as a part of the silent policy. They are no longer required to choose all of them at once. Finally, we also make it easier for you to organize and find your important files. And with that in mind, OneDrive Home is rolling out to iOS right now, which provides easy access to all your files, keeping the recent files, shared libraries, and critical offline documents just a tap away for whenever you need them. Soon, this feature would also be releasing to Android. And one of our most popular features, Add to OneDrive, is also rolling out to public preview with the option of opting out. But why would you? Now, when someone shares a folder with you in OneDrive, Microsoft SharePoint, or Microsoft Teams, you can easily add a shortcut to that shared folder directly in your OneDrive. Lastly, we've also released some performance improvements, upgrading page load times to help users get their work done in half the time. For more information on all these, check out our blogs on aka.ms/OneDrive/blog. Over to you, Jason, for announcements around Ignite sessions.
That's right. We just had Ignite last month, and it was an awesome show, our first fully virtual Ignite, a new experience for doing that. But one of the best parts is it means all our talks are available online. So in the show notes, we'll make sure to have a link to our blog post about Ignite, and we'll cover like what's new and coming to OneDrive that Ankita and I did, which gives you an overview. But as some of our depth talks that are kind of some of the most exciting and interesting ones to join, whether it's external sharing and collaboration with OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams, deployment and configuration of OneDrive Sync, and driving OneDrive adoption with a remote workforce, which in these times is a relevant and timely topic. So those are all great to check out. And again, we'll make sure it's in the show notes so you can click right on them and go listen in.
So Jason, what do you have for us as a special topic this month?
Well, we're in the run-up to the elections here in the United States, and I thought it'd be helpful to remind folks and encourage them to vote.
It is so important.
That's right. And while in the US, much of the attention here is often on the national elections, it gets the headlines. There are equally important races at the state and local levels. And I'm sure that's true in your community as well. If you can vote, participating lets you have your voice heard. It influences how your government functions at every level, improving your life as well as everyone else's, and especially your loved ones.
It seems important to have a plan then. Do we have some suggestions for our listeners around that?
Well, voting can be different in every country around the world, and I know we have listeners everywhere. But the first step is making sure you know what the local requirements and rules are. An important one here in the United States is often knowing whether you're registered to vote. You can often find those online and find good, useful tools to tell you whether you're registered and what the requirements are for it.
I would also suggest knowing how you will vote. If you have a choice, like here in Washington, where we can mail in ballots or vote in person, and there may be other options where you live.
That's right. These things are going to vary in different places. You may need to request a ballot for the form you prefer in person or mail in or even online. And it's also important to plan ahead. When you're listening to this, we're not going to be very far from the U.S. elections. And if you did not already plan, it may impact some of the choices you still have available. Maybe too late for some of them. And so you're going to need to figure that out.
So once you have that, it's time to vote. So Jason, how do you prepare? What do you do to vote in time?
I love taking advantage of the fact that here in Washington, we have mail-in voting to spend the time really considering all the options on my ballot. I like to read the pamphlet that we receive that includes statements from the candidates or statements about the different propositions and acts, as well as reading online. I always like to see what different sources are recommending online. And often your local newspapers and magazines will have write-ups about the pertinent local elections that can give you some information to help make those choices. And then, I fill in my ovals and send it off.
It is so important to make sure your voice is heard, and not voting means letting others have more of a say over what matters most to you. So Jason, did you vote already?
I did. And, I'm fortunate because here I'm able to track my ballot and know that it's been safely delivered, which honestly made me feel good about the whole thing. I hope every one of you listening is able to take advantage of voting wherever you are to affect your lives and those you care about as much as you possibly can. Please do take advantage of that.
Thank you to our guests, Stephen Rice and Noorez Khamis. To learn more about OneDrive and the latest developments, please follow our tech community blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog.
And please do send us your questions and feedback. You can reach us on Twitter at OneDrive, @Jasmo, and @Ankita_Kirti21. And definitely visit our show page for links, resources, and more at aka.ms/syncup. That's SYNCUP. Subscribe to and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoy Sync Up, tell others what you've learned from the show, whether it's a scarecrow in the pumpkin patch or the ghosts around the corner. Word of mouth is still the best way for people to learn about new podcasts and new information. And if you're curious about other cool shows by Microsoft, go to aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts. There's something for everyone.
Thank you for listening to Sync Up, a show about OneDrive, the intelligent files app for Microsoft 365. Awesome, yay!